Hello, my name is Dr. Carl Candlepun, and this is the 14th official episode of my Lost podcast. As such, it features spoilers for up to and including Season 1, Episode 14, Special. It features no spoilers beyond this point in the show. However, if you have not seen at least to this point in the series, I highly encourage you to do so first before proceeding with this podcast. But without further ado, let's begin. Hello, and welcome to Dr. Candlepun's Lost podcast. I am Christopher Huth, otherwise known as Dr. Candlepun.
And I am Michael Huth, also known as Administrator Flickerson.
And today we are here to talk about Season 1, Episode 14 of Lost, Special. You were saying before we started that you really didn't remember anything about this one. I'm wondering what it was specifically that you were like kind of surprised that you didn't remember.
Man, where do I begin? Had no recollection whatsoever of how Walt and Michael, thank you. So weird. I
Your name.
Walt and Michael became estranged, and then even with the knowing that his mom had passed, and that's kind of how they got back together type thing. Nothing. I didn't really remember anything. Didn't remember how they split. Didn't remember the separation. And it kind of came back to me. Caught completely off guard when Michael gets hit by the car because I didn't remember anything about that. But even though it felt like it was the first time I watched it, I did like the way that whole flashback tied everything together, made it make sense, right down to him doing the stand-up thing and not telling Walt that this dude didn't want him, kind of blaming it on himself.
Yep.
Which explains a whole bunch of just the baseline angst that they're suffering from here on the island.
Yeah, I don't know what you were expecting coming into those flashbacks. Like if you anticipated that Michael, like the reason that Michael wasn't in Walt's life to begin with, like I didn't know if you were imagining that he just wasn't interested or something like that.
It's funny you say that because I think I'd manufactured in my mind this memory that him and Walt's mom didn't get along, but it was based around the idea that he had a different path in life he wanted to take, and this was kind of like a hiccup, and he chose to go his own way, which oddly enough, how sexist.
Well, it's funny because we had Thomas, Claire's boyfriend, a few episodes ago. He was kind of that guy that was just like, yeah, nope, I'm out. I don't want any part of this. I have my own stuff going on. Art, actually, as well. That's what's fun. That just now occurred to me. That both Thomas and Michael have their art that they might have to put aside if they're going to raise their kid. Thomas is like, yeah, no, I'm out. Whereas Michael's very much the opposite of that.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, emotionally, did it upset you in any way watching the way that played out?
Yeah, it did. I mean, yeah, I got caught up in that because it's like, number one, I'll just say that the acting that Michael does, or whoever the actor is that plays Michael.
Harold Pierre not that it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm probably mispronouncing
on that.
Name.
Harold. So the acting he did on the scene where he's playing with little Walt on the carpet and she's telling him that they're moving, like when that scene opens in the flashback.
Oh, yeah.
The acting he did, that was awesome. I mean, yeah, that tied me in because I'm just like, man, it doesn't give you a whole bunch of background of what their problems are, but then he's in that like I'll do anything mode, which, like, spoiler alert, if you find yourself saying that, you missed a lot of opportunities before you had to start begging for that chance. But yeah, I thought that was some great acting there, and it really set the scene for everything that happened after that. The phone call, not remembering until he's making this phone call from a payphone. And I think she's saying, let me call you back. And just remember, I literally felt it. Like, I didn't know where the scene was going to go, but she's saying, let me call you back. And I'm sitting there going, this dude, what a miserable feeling when you just want to talk, about your relationship. You just want to talk to your son. And then things are going well for her. Come to find out she's got another dude. But she's wanting to call you back, and it's like, that's not an option. I don't have anything for you to call. I'm literally on the street on a payphone. If he'd have walked to an alley and crawled into a box to go to sleep, it would have surprised me at that point. Like, that's down and out. I mean, that's how it felt anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so a lot of people have a very extreme reaction to Susan, Walt's mom. Do you feel any of that at all, or do you not, or do you sympathize with where she's coming from?
Well, it's not that I sympathize with her or him, but it really, again, with my background, it feels like a story that is old as time, right? I mean, it's like if a relationship's going to go south, we all know, spoiler alert, a lot of times it's about money or finances. Here, this story seems to get played out in movies and series a lot, where either the guy or the girl has such potential. One of the reasons their mate is attracted to him, and then something happens where nothing's going their way. They're not getting the job they want, and then their potential starts to drain or disappear, and that piece of why that person loved them also disappears, and then the relationship stuff starts. And again, that's kind of just how I read it. So I wasn't super I guess mad at her for that, but at the same time, the idea that it got a little shame on you for me when he's begging her not to go, and he's saying, I'm not gonna let him. And she's like, you really want to fight me on this? You haven't worked in so long. I got this high paying job, essentially. I'm getting a promotion, whatever. Like sitting there telling him, essentially tucking the nice away and going, well, if I have to fight you for him, I'm going to destroy you. You're jobless, and I'm the reason that you're probably have a roof over your head right now. That type of thing. She very rounded off, but that's all you need to know about what she's willing to do if she had to. So
yeah. Well, then, like, when she comes after his accident and is saying, like, hey, like, I want Brian to adopt Walt, like, I want you to let him go, like.
Yeah,
I think that's more of where people's anger comes from, is cutting him out of his son's life.
Yeah, I feel that. And because, not that I recalled from 20 years ago, the very fact that she showed up, my thought process was, well, what does she want? You know what I mean? And then it hit me like, oh yeah, that's right. So it's all coming together.
Yeah.
And then again, I don't remember, like when she started saying, I don't feel so good, there was a point in there where I was like, wait a second, dude, like, did she literally die in this scene? Like, is it like one of those sudden things, aneurysm, something like that? I couldn't remember. But then flashing past that to this guy showing up at Walt's door, or Michael's door.
Yeah.
And, essentially telling him, like, hey, I didn't want him. I wanted her, and she wanted me to. Like, wow.
There's a quick side note before I get back on what we're talking about. His name was Brian, the stepdad, or the adopted dad. Last week, we talked about the Boone Shannon thing and the abusive boyfriend that Shannon was with, which was actually part of a con. His name was Brian. So it's the second episode of 2 weeks where we have like a minor character come in the flashbacks that's named Brian. They're both pretty douchey. And it makes me wonder, like, is there somebody named Brian that, like, the writers had an issue with? So yeah, it's a little weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
But anyway, so getting back to Walt's mom, I think I have a little bit more to say about her. The fact that she kept Michael's letters and cards from Walt, like,
yeah, that hit pretty hard. That was pretty real, because I guess what you have to ask yourself is if there's any redeeming reason why this separation was righteous and she shouldn't be held accountable, and she's doing what's best for her and Walt. How is having Walt believe that his dad has never wanted anything to do with him, how does that benefit Walt? That's where it turns into a sinister. It's not about the child anymore. It's about you and what you might have to deal with if he decides he wants to spend time with his dad, which you're not interested in.
That's exactly how she frames it to Michael about Michael letting Walt go. Is like,
why are you holding on so much? Is it about you, or is it about him, or is it about you?
Yeah.
And she's not. It seems like it's possible that she's not realizing that what she's doing.
Yes.
My take on why she's doing everything that she's doing, including hiding the cards, is that okay. Well, so you go back to the first flashback when they're shopping for a crib and she's pregnant, and it's kind of established that she has kind of turned down the idea of marrying Michael, and the excuse she's given is that it's too prosaic. But then, of course, later she marries this other guy. So clearly that isn't what it was. To me, that suggests that she was never really in love with Michael, or at least never like completely sure that he was the one she wanted to end up with. So I think that once, okay, now I'm in love with this guy and I want to marry him, like she wishes that this was the father of her child. It would just be so much simpler. It would be the idea, it would be this family that she's always imagined having versus this other more complicated situation. And so that's where she's, in her mind, I think once he adopts Walt and Michael stops pursuing Walt, she can just pretend like, okay, yeah, this is it. Like this is what the situation is. And so for that reason, she doesn't really pay attention to the fact that Brian, even though apparently he tried to communicate it, isn't really interested in being a father.
Like, oh, you'll get used to it.
And she doesn't consider whether or not Walt deserves to know that he has this biological father out there that wants to at least write him and express love for him.
Messing up her preconceived notions of house.
Yeah. And so it's all that's to say, like, I agree that what she's doing is not right and it is motivated for selfish reasons. But I'm not as like hateful towards her as a lot of fans are. Because like I can kind of appreciate that, and I could kind of appreciate that she probably doesn't consciously recognize why she's doing what she's doing. And I like what Michael says at the end of the episode about like, well, she didn't throw them away either, the cards.
Yeah.
So some part of her must have like wanted him to have them.
Yeah.
That's why I think a lot of this stuff was going on an unconscious level for her. So yeah, I don't like, I'm not as harsh in like my persecution of her, but no, I definitely think she's in the wrong. Well, so we've kind of established that we think where Susan's coming from, neither of us feels like that's from the right place. Right. But I would argue she maybe has a point, like with what she says to Michael in the hospital about like, would it benefit Walt at this point for Michael to continue trying to fight her on custody or making that situation more complicated? Yeah, basically, it seems as though she convinced Michael to let him go for Walt's own sake. Do you think that was the right decision?
I think that is for reasons unlike depicted in this show, I think that is a situation that so many, I don't want to make it one-sided, but I will say dads face in maybe not this exact scenario, but because the child support is overwhelming, the custody issues are overwhelming. And I know moms suffer this as well. It just really depends how the court starts it. And when you can't find the common ground, which is the child, and then you make it about yourself, even if you can't see that it's about yourself, whoever's losing that tug of war, so to speak, is in a spot where unless you've been there, you cannot possibly comprehend what you'd be willing to do just to make the pain go away, just to make it stop. You could absolutely convince yourself that letting go is the thing to do, not only for your own sanity, but just knowing that child is, if this keeps going back and forth, that child is going to at some point reach the age in which they're aware that they're the pawn in this game they never asked to play. And so that's it may not be the intent, but that being the issue, that being the storyline that got them on the island, what a great origin story for where they're at right now. When you meet him and you're trying to figure out, like, Walt seems like a pretty good kid. Why is Mike being such a butt to him? Like, he's still fighting his own demons.
Well, yeah, so because Michael, I think, trusts that Susan will take good care of Walt, and that he doesn't really know this Brian guy, but he's at least like financially well off, and if Susan loves him, then I'm sure he trusts that he's at least a decent guy. So So when you factor all of that in, that like, okay, if I drop this kid, my kid will have a good life, and maybe me fighting them on this is only gonna make that, trying to find another word besides more complicated, but yeah, like in some way traumatizing for the kid, or upsetting at least. I don't love that Susan forces him to make that choice, but I think the episode does a good job of getting you to understand why Michael makes that decision, even though he really didn't want to, for his own sake.
Yeah, and I think that hits the nail on the head. Like the situation he's in to make that decision, he shouldn't be in. Mm-hmm. It just should not happen. Like there is, how you could ever think that a biological parent doesn't have room in a kid's life or would complicate a kid's life. Although you can still say that's true if there's these split homes. It's not a good touchstone to say like, yeah, because we're split, the child should, be alienated from the side that we split from, so to speak. It in some cases that's absolutely the best thing for the kid. I'd say in a lot of cases it's best that the kid stay connected, and that's where, once again, nobody wants to be friends with their ex necessarily, although there's plenty of people who do it. I think the people who handle their issues the best, who've also had kids and these kids are in split home, they start every interaction with that child in mind, and they don't want the child to think anything negative about the other. This is probably more typical. I don't know what the stats are on that, right? It's probably more typical. So I think him being put in that position, once again, it's a lose-lose. He absolutely wants to be a part of Michael's life, but if he does it, Walt. My goodness, this kid's got so many names. If he does that, then he risks alienating him and him not wanting to be around him anyway. Because that's kind of how that can work too. If she's willing to manipulate to get what she wants, when are the stories going to start about, look what he's doing to our family? Look what he's doing to your dad. The only dad you've ever known. Things can just get out of hand real quick. So,
yeah, I think the last thing that I have to say on that particular subject is, like, even though Susan's right, okay, like Michael wanting to put up this fight is more so for his sake. That doesn't necessarily make it wrong. Like, he loves his son, he wants to be part of his son's life. That doesn't make it bad.
Well, I want to piggyback on that though, because if we're going to say it's all selfish on his part, I guess I say humbly, but I would say that my kids, I absolutely could bring value to their life at some level, whether their mother chose to be with me or not. We're separated, so I don't think there's a scenario in which it would just be selfish of me to want to expose them to my thought processes and, the way I was raised and just fundamental life value type stuff that I share. Again, staying in the same home, both parents do that. They, if they're blessed, they get to know the parents of their parents, their grandparents, and you just get generational information that you can't get any other way. And so to take that out and to call it selfish because you want to provide it, even though you're no longer, part of that nuclear part of that family, I think sometimes it's unfair to call that selfish, right? But again, big picture stuff. The easiest, cleanest thing to do is like, one dad, one mom. This person's out of the picture,
Yeah. Well, okay. So you, a minute ago, you were saying, like, you referenced the On Island storyline, and it seemed that you were it seemed like you're a lot more on Walt's side, that Michael's being kind of harsh and more so than it needs to be, maybe. Which, I mean, actually, I would agree with. But, I mean, I just want to kind of go to the start of the episode in Michael's perspective. Like, he finds out that Locke has been giving a knife to his kid and letting him not play with it, but
Yeah.
And he doesn't know Locke, and he was kind of unsure about Locke to begin with anyways. Sure. And having been a kid with parents that have reacted in similar ways to, like, Michael, like, getting mad and throwing the comic in the fire, yeah. Like, I could totally be in Walt's shoes and feel the injustice of that and how cruel that is. But at the same time, like what Michael's responding to, like the disrespect that he's getting from Walt. I mean, and in that moment, what Walt had just said was like, "Oh, where were you? Like, you didn't want to be part of my life." And he doesn't know, like, how untrue, like how much Michael desperately wanted to be part of his life. and he's upset that Walt's blaming him for that. And the whole reason that he didn't be part of his life is because Susan convinced him it was for Walt's sake.
When he threw the comic in the fire, that's not what I was talking about.
Okay.
And I guess I should rephrase. So from the beginning, I will say his meanness, most likely in my heart, came from a place of being overly protective, or being a mix between overly protective and not having been responsible for his protection. Like, he doesn't even know what it feels like to be responsible for this kid. And now they managed to survive a plane crash, and this kid's running around willy-nilly like he's 2 years younger than Locke, and not, he doesn't know where he's at, and there's also this being seen as issue I'm sure he's dealing with. Like, everyone knows that he's Walt's dad, and then I swear Walt's been lost almost as much as that dog, Vincent.
Yep.
Yeah. Nailed it. Yeah. So I think that's kind of a weird thing. Now, I will say though, the comic book in the fire, if that's not a snapshot of just the worst side of parenting, that more parents have probably done something like that, or are capable of it, have had that thought. I've probably not thrown a comic in a fire, but I've probably done something like that. Yeah. Like, gotten so upset about a disrespect of something that I've disregarded a toy, or disregarded something that I knew they cared about. Yeah. And and if you really think about it, it's that really simple thought process. Oh, you're not going to respect me, then I'm not going to respect your thing. Those two things don't compare on a real level, but still, it serves only to hurt. Like, oh, I'm hurt, so I'll hurt you. And so it's not a good picture for sure. And then, but to your point as well, I think the most interesting part about it is, which makes Michael more of a stand-up person than some viewers might give him, is that he could jump on that. He could jump on that early and often, that, hey, it's your mom's fault. Let me explain why. Let me show you these letters that your mom never gave you. She did all this. She did all this. He's not doing that. Yeah. He's letting him feel negatively about him.
Yeah, he's letting himself be the bad guy.
Yeah, he's letting himself be the bad guy because something in him, the gentleman in him, the father in him, something that he's doing right, knows that that's also a losing battle, even though the truth
especially since she died.
Yes, that doesn't hurt. But
he doesn't want to tarnish his memory of his mom, or make him hate his mom, who will never be able to redeem herself in his eyes, or defend herself. To explain why she did what she did.
I think that's it. I do have a sense, though, if she were alive and this is the first trip they got to take where this happened, I'm not sure he would handle it any different way. He just seems to be pretty self-effacing with all of that. I don't think it's just about the fact that she's not there. I think maybe it could be that he cared for her that much that he's still able to look at it that way, that we say everyone should be, that you know what, she was important to me at a time. That's not going to change no matter what happened. She's important to him, and that's not going to change no matter what happens. So I think he'd probably do something like that, even if she hadn't passed.
Fair enough.
Makes for a better story.
Well, yeah, but I mean, because as far as Brian, he also doesn't. I think he's coming from a completely different place for not exposing, Brian. He knows that would hurt Walt.
Yes.
It's not about. It's not about
Well, wait till Walt finds out. His dad was sleeping with the nanny. Because no, seriously, on the nanny though, stand up for her to give that box.
Yeah.
And in that flashback, I was like, Walt's mom's ashes. That's the first thing that came to my mind, and I'm thinking why? I don't remember that.
Did you remember that in the episode we talked about last week, that he found his luggage on the island, and he found that box and he looked in it, and it didn't show what was in there.
Yeah. And I feel like we talked about it. Do you have any idea what's in that?
I haven't edited that
because he got emotional about it and shut the box again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a lot about the Michael Walt relationship. I think the other big thing that these flashbacks establish, as well as the on island stuff, the episode's called Special, and Brian's reason for coming to Michael, at first he's saying the stuff which I absolutely believe is true, which is that he never really wanted to be a dad, but then when Michael's really getting in his face, he's like, well, it's more than that. like there's something different about this kid. Like stuff happens, and you get to see the one flashback example of that with the bird.
Mm-hmm.
Did you pick up on the polar bear being another example of that?
No.
So in the comic, specifically when he throws it in the fire,
yeah,
the polar bear's there.
Okay, and he's looking at the birds in the book.
He's getting frustrated that his dad Brian's not paying attention.
Yeah.
Suddenly, that exact bird flies in the window and dies. Same thing on the island. He's getting mad at Michael, and he's looking at the image in the book of the polar bear, and then suddenly, what do you know? The polar bear comes going.
It did not run into a window and kill itself, which would have been helpful.
Ran into a knife and hurt itself, you could say.
Yeah, can I just bring up how stupid Michael was for leaving the knife in the bear?
He didn't, did he?
Oh yeah, yeah. At least that's how I interpreted the scene. When it flashed back to Locke, I could almost see his heart broken in his eyes. Like, that was a good knife.
Well, I'm gonna have to go back and look at that because if that's the case, I've never noticed that.
But no, I got the impression that when he jabbed out at that bear and it made the "oh, you got me" noise, that he came back empty-handed.
Well, so let's assume that you're right, because you may well be. My defense of that would be that he didn't do it intentionally. That he did it, and then like before he was able to yank it out.
Man, you should absolutely Google how to stab somebody. You should.
I think you're saying Michael. Knife. I think you're saying Michael should.
Yeah, not you. Yeah. You'll never have to stab.
I want to make sure that I'm being clear. I'm saying that he never intended.
No, I understand
for it to leave his hand, but that in the situation, what?
Having used some knives, the accidentally releasing one's knife
when it's stabbed deep into a bear
in a bone, it'll come back out. You might have to use a foot to brace yourself. Short of like blood being on your hands or losing the grip on the knife. You might
have to use. Hold on, I want to focus on that. You might have to use a foot to brace yourself. That's what I'm
saying. Going into the bone.
If a giant bear is yanking away,
yeah, nope.
You say there's no way that it could that I mean, I just don't understand because like if somebody's grabbing something that I've got to like. Let's say it's not a knife, but it's got the same type of handle as a knife, and somebody grabs it, and then they yank a certain way away. There's no way in which that comes out with the force of a bear.
I'm not saying no way. You don't say never, always. I'm just saying,
especially with the adrenaline and sweaty hands. And
unless it's stuck in bone or something like that. No, I don't. I mean, again, I need to review the scene again.
Okay,
but I think we should probably get some polar bears or people dressed in polar bear suits and see what we can recreate.
Well, yeah, it's going to be funny if it ends up that he didn't even let go of it. because this is all moot. But, like, I don't know. Me, personally, I would be willing to suspend my disbelief that he just lost his grip on it in that situation. It sounds like you wouldn't be willing to do that.
Yeah.
And well, fine. Let's say that he did it, like, out of fear. Like he stabs it and then he thinks it's about to claw him, and then out of fear he lets it go. Would you be willing to accept that? Because then it's like, oh, he didn't.
Well, here's why, right? like if you, and again, it's a bear and a human. If you were in fear for your life and I came at you and you stabbed me, you would probably, even if it's your first cutting, you stab me. If I'm not running away from you, like trying to keep my hydraulics from leaking out, you would want to have that knife in case I wasn't done coming at you.
Look,
if I'm worried about this bear coming at me, because again, you don't have to be a genius to know that if you stab a polar bear, it ain't gonna kill it. Like it's going to be around for a minute before its hydraulics wear out. If you got in them.
I think that where we're different here is like you're arguing from a logical, and I 100% agree with you. I'm saying that, like, in a purely, like, high adrenaline, never been in this situation before, you stab this thing and its arm's coming at you or its mouth's coming at you, and then just out of pure reaction, no thought process, you let go and jump back. Like, I'm saying that makes sense to me that it would happen. I'm not saying that it was the right thing to do, or that if he, logically calculated that he should have done it.
I'm gonna let it be.
So you're right to be frustrated that it happened and to think that it was a mistake. But I also don't think that it's unrealistic that somebody would do that in that situation with no training or anything. Yeah. Okay.
I like it.
We'll see how much of that.
I really wanted to key in on Locke's broken heart that his knife was missing. If indeed we find out
he's
missing.
He's got a bunch.
He does. But that one's made a few scenes.
Well, so getting back to what I was the Walt phenomena thing, because we were talking about it's almost like he summoned that polar bear the way that he summoned that bird. I'm
glad to know that now.
Yeah,
I completely missed it.
Well, and so to continue with that, it kind of recontextualizes some things that have happened in earlier episodes regarding Walt that may have been examples of him demonstrating this exact thing. Well, so actually, let me go back to the beginning of this episode, because there's one more in this episode. When Walt's first practicing throwing the knife, he's like, "Oh man, I suck." Picture it in your mind's eye, and then it gets really intense, and like Vincent kind of like perks up, like something weird's going on, and then he nails it, and he's like, "No, it's like it was real. Like I really saw it." So it's like he manifested that the way that he's manifesting these other things. But going back into previous episodes, you remember a few weeks back when he's playing backgammon with Hurley. And he's like, "Okay, I need double sixes." And he's like getting every roll that he wants. And he's like, "I'm lucky." And Hurley's like, "Nobody's that lucky." And Walt says, "Well, Brian says I was the luckiest. I'm the luckiest kid he's ever known," or something like that. So,
all the things I miss.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily have thought anything of it the first time through. It's one of those things where it's cool. Another example of why it's fun to rewatch things when you can remember them.
Not 20 years apart.
Yeah, you can kind of catch these things. Well, it's a going back all the way to like the third episode of the series, the first episode after the pilot. You remember where Michael's swearing that he's not giving up on Vincent. He's like, "I'm going to find your dog, Walt." He's like, "I swear, as soon as it stops raining, I'm going to find your dog." And then Walt's like shaking his head, and he looks at him, and then the rain stops.
Yes.
So it could be an example of like Walt wanted it to not be raining anymore, then it wasn't raining.
So you're saying there's a chance that Walt wanted this plane to crash on this island?
Why?
Don't give that kid a window.
That's not what I'm saying.
That's all I'm saying.
What I guess what you could say is that if Walt for some reason wanted the plane to crash, maybe that had something to do with it.
Made it.
But
he's sitting at the window seat going, "That looks like a nice island to be stranded on." Check.
Okay, so this is a real quick thing, kind of related to polar bears and Walt. I'm assuming that the writers did this intentionally. The joke about a penguin with a sunburn and how that's a dumb joke.
Yeah.
But like it kind of parallels the polar bear thing because why would a penguin be somewhere where it could get a sunburn?
Yep.
Same with the polar bear.
Yeah.
So I just find that
amusing. Like that.
Okay, so I guess now we can go to. I know you're eager to talk about this. After last week's episode being about Boone and that ending the way that it did, this episode starts with Boone being very loyal to Locke and defensive of Locke. And so you had stuff to say about that?
Boone can't even get the drop on somebody right when like he literally gets him, disarms him, and then gets punched off of a front mount when he has the guy's knife. It was like, man, I don't know if these writers are just like, let's make this desperate dude, and at every turn where even a blind guy who's right 1 time out of 10 could get something right, let's make him wrong 100% of the time, even if it looks like he's right. It was so Boone that this happened that I'm just like, of course that happened. How did I forget that in 20 years? This kind of thing should have been burnt in my gray matter. But I just found it funny. So the loyalty for Locke completely dismissed by the, just the silliness and the inaptitude. Yeah. But getting to that particular point, once again, yes, he's loyal. But more importantly, he wanted to be seen as Locke's savior. He wanted Locke to see, like, well, I can also do things for you. And Locke's like, yeah, kind of. Yes, you could carry things.
Yeah.
Take a load off my back.
And I was bringing up his loyalty, not as like, oh, good for Boone. More so like, the resolution to last week's episode was Locke forced him to go through this experience.
Yeah.
And the result of that was okay, I'm with this guy.
Yes, yeah,
I am
100%.
going to listen to this guy from now on,
Yep.
and I'm going to be, and maybe that's good, maybe that's bad
Yeah,
for Boone and or Locke or whoever else. The point is, like the way that progresses in this episode is like he's willing to like get
Yep.
in a fight with a guy with a knife,
yeah.
for Locke, and it's just
And then flash forward into Shannon,
Yep.
where she's asking him for help. Like, oh man, this story again, this song and dance again. And he's like, no thanks. And the funny thing about that is just I didn't remember that from 20 years ago, but I could see it coming from a mile away with just that almost that blank.
yeah, he just won't
expression on
even
his
like
face.
look at her.
Yeah,
really. He's
he's
just
just
like
like,
kind of
nah, I'm good.
yeah. Did you feel like what was your feeling on how he was reacting to her?
It's pretty hard to have sympathy for her knowing everything that we know. Yet, again, all things being equal, right? In my mind, I'm sensing if I'm her, she's probably feeling something in that moment didn't even know she was capable of feeling, right? Like wait a second. This isn't working. Like this is not working with the one dude that when all else failed, it worked time and time again. Even when he knew that was manipulating him, I could still manipulate him. I think that's the kicker there. Yeah.
Yeah. My thing is like he seems very cold and detached, but like the coldness with which he's treating her, it almost feels like he's trying too hard. Like to me, if the conclusion reached at the end of the last episode was like, yeah, I need to let this relationship go. I need to stop obsessing over that, and I just need to kind of be my own person. I think if he was genuinely doing those things, then it would just be like, oh no, thank you. Like I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing with him, and what like it feels like.
I know
He's
exactly,
almost trying to hurt her or
Yes,
something,
yeah.
and that seems to be counterintuitive. Like if he really didn't care,
yes,
then he wouldn't be doing that.
Another story old as time in family relationships where someone is more vile than they need to be, and that's not about their disdain for the person that they're trying to separate from. That's their disdain for their inability to separate if there's any pushback or any pullback, so to speak. And so they feel that the more vile they are, the better chance they have of driving that person away, where them coming back isn't an option, right? Little Google U psychology degree. But yeah, I find that interesting as well. Like he has to go overboard, or otherwise he knows himself. He might get sucked back in.
Yeah, I like that. I might cut this out because I can't imagine there's gonna be much conversation to be had about it. But like the very opening moment of the episode is like Michael standing outside the cave yelling for Walt, and then Charlie walks up and he asks if Michael's seen Claire's bags, and Michael says, "No, have you seen my son?" And Charlie goes, "Have you seen her bags?" Like every time I watch it, it's like so weird. Like I feel like they're going for some kind of joke there, but like it just like I don't know. It's just like, why would you ignore? Like that's obviously the more serious thing.
Sure, Charlie's like, you've lost Walt 6 times since this plane crash. This is the first time we have misplaced my pretend girlfriend's bags. Yeah, that is funny. He did something else, and I won't be able to. You might know what I'm talking about. There was some weird, almost like he'd had a mental break response to something in the episode. It was almost like a goofy kind of laugh or something. I don't know.
Well, I imagine what you're talking about is when they finally get Claire's stuff back and he gets it back to the caves, and like he takes out her diary and then, like he fights with himself. He walks away, then comes back, and he's like, I always enjoy that scene, and I find it really funny. Do you think that's what you're talking about?
No, it might have been in that for sure, but there is a part in which he literally makes a noise, almost like a weird, half cynical, half like forgot to take my medicine for breakfast kind of laugh. I'm probably manufacturing that like the knife and the bear. I don't know. But I did like that. Clearly, Kate was concerned that Sawyer might be even more depraved than she thought, and would have read Claire's diary, right? And then you see Charlie struggling with the same thing. The two perspectives is like the most selfish thing you could want if you were Charlie is to read that diary. The most selfless thing or gentlemanly thing you could do is never read that diary. Leave those thoughts where she laid them, and if the intent was to share them with you, then she might have shared something with you and then wrote down the conversation versus just laying out her thoughts in a diary. Diaries and things like that. I feel like that's just a sacred thing. Like I don't know at what point you learn that when you're a kid. I mean, maybe when you pick up somebody's notebook and some girl smacks the taste out of your mouth. I don't know, but it seemed weird that. Or it was a good thing to struggle with.
Yeah, I'm gonna offer. I don't actually believe this is the case. I'm gonna offer a potential justification for him reading the diary, a potential motive to justify it. But I don't think I don't think this was his motive. Yeah. He may have thought. Someone might argue that he might have thought. That there was some clue into there as like oh, she might have written something about Ethan, or what was going on with her that could have been some kind of clue. Again, I don't. There's nothing in this episode that makes me think that that's where he was coming from.
That fits smooth into Forensic Files. Yeah, for sure.
Now that said, what I actually think his motivation was, it doesn't make it okay. But I think so for me, there's a huge difference between Sawyer reading the diary and Charlie reading the diary.
Yeah.
And if Sawyer's reading it, it's out of morbid, or not morbid, but like his entertainment, for his amusement.
Yeah.
And that's such a huge violation for that. Charlie, again, it doesn't make it right, but I much more empathize with why I think he read it, and that is he misses her so much. It's like what he's saying to Kate. Like the longer she's gone, like it feels like pieces of him are crumbling away. He doesn't understand that because of how short a time they knew each other. I think he's in so much pain and distress about her being gone that like in his desperation to feel connected to her again, he's reading stuff that she communicated to herself and in private. Yes. And yeah, that makes it kind of gross, but
I would piggyback on that to say that I also think that he, be it right or wrong and mostly wrong, in a normal situation, a normal, worldly setting, I think he's desperate to know how she feels about him, what she hasn't said, with that idea of not like, she's missing. It's not he's like, okay, well, now I don't have to worry about where she's at because she doesn't like me anyway. Not that it's that, but that, him feeling like, he's going to see her again. They're going to find her. They're going to do whatever. But maybe he should, take a step back from trying to show how much he cared about her and that he wanted to take care of her and things like that. Just kind of, again, selfishly, but wanting to know whether he was barking up the right tree or not, that type of thing.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's all subjective. So I certainly couldn't say that interpretation is wrong. I would say I don't love that interpretation. The romantic in me prefers the other one. But yeah, there's certainly, and I do. He seems reassured when he reads that. The question is whether or not that's what he was looking for in the first place. And yeah, fair enough. Do you have any thoughts on what he does end up finding? He seems to think could be a clue as to where she's at. And that is this dream that she references that she has multiple times, which is her being near some kind of black rock and not being able to get away from it. I don't expect that you do, but any thoughts on that?
No, other than the fact that I was very thankful that the writers decided to write in the previous reference when talking to the French woman, when Saeed's talking to the French woman and all that stuff, because I wouldn't have remembered her mentioning the Black Rock from that episode. I wouldn't have remembered that.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't forget, her saying that, they all went mad or whatever, that type of thing. But that Black
Rock,
you said
they all got sick.
Oh, they all got sick, sorry.
I think your interpretation of that, or at least a potential interpretation you had was
mentally ill.
Was that they were mentally ill, yeah.
But yeah, I didn't think much of that. Matter of fact, I let my mind go wild again for that split second while he found whatever he found, and he was running to say what it was. I was immediately thinking, oh, it's a dream, but it's going to be one of those things where kind of like the guy holding the hand over her face, all that stuff, that it wasn't really going to be a dream. It was just going to be her writing down what actually happened, and they would have to face the fact that it wasn't a dream.
Yeah, that makes sense. But okay, well, so we saw one of her dreams on screen in her episode, and And then obviously that's the same episode where they established the psychic thing, and that seemed to suggest that he really knew the plane was going to crash. And now in this episode we get the stuff with Walt. These things like coming together suggest that there's some kind of like supernatural phenomenon going on in this show.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? I was trying to figure out if I had a specific question about it.
No, I mean I definitely, as dense as I can be, I definitely saw that.
Yeah.
Now again, you had to tell me about the Walt episodes, but just that guy saying Walt was special, just that whole piece that, you had the psychic piece with her, these premonitions that she's having, I guess what we could call them, dreams, premonitions, mixed with maybe some reality that everybody wants to dismiss as a mental break. When I say everybody, I mean Jack. Yeah, something's up. And then we already have Locke, Locke, his connection to the island, or the island wanting to do something so much for him, clearly.
Yeah.
Now, I need to go back in my mind. Is there any shot that Walt had that comic book when they saw the first polar bear?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I can't believe I forgot to point it out. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sweet. Okay.
In the pilot, that's when you first see the comic. He's reading it, and Michael asks him if he speaks Spanish. And he says no, but I like the pictures.
Okay.
Yeah. So that happened in the pilot, and then I don't think it was necessarily the next scene, but it was shortly after that the group off in the jungle encounters that polar bear.
Walt.
Well, so that raises a question of, so the bird that flew into the window, Walt had just established that bird was native to Australia. He was saying that what his homework was studying birds of Australia, and he didn't understand. He's like, we're in Australia, shouldn't we be studying birds of Egypt or something?
Yeah.
So basically, that establishes that there's not necessarily anything supernatural happening there, because that bird is native.
Yeah.
And so it flies in the window. The polar bear thing raised the question. Like, somebody could potentially have the question of like, okay, well, so were polar bears actually on this island, or did Walt somehow conjure one up?
Yeah.
Any thought on that?
It does feel like a more of a conjuring, like it does. And again, the whole idea that that's a native bird native to Australia, I'd even be willing to dismiss that with the latter evidence to go, yeah, nah. If he thinks about it hard enough, it happens, right? Or something similar. Now, why he would think of that polar bear and have it attack him, I don't know. He should.
Well, I mean, you could argue that he just doesn't have control over what
little Stranger Things. Just trying to get control of his powers. I like it.
Yeah. The only thing I have left is the very, very end of the episode. Locke and Boone are looking for Vincent, and then out stumbles Claire.
Yeah.
Did that surprise you?
I thought it was going to be a build-up and nothing, and it was going to be Vincent. Somewhere in there, I feel like I realized that it was going to be Claire, and I could predict the state that Claire's in if you want, because I had a thought as soon as she came through there. Obviously, she's disheveled and whatnot. She's escaped captivity. Maybe she's released because they got what they wanted, which is her child. I just immediately felt like she was without child.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know you don't remember this, but 20 years ago when you watched this episode, you had to wait 3 weeks before Lost came back and continued that storyline. Because of that, it will also be 3 weeks before our next episode goes up. As always, I'm going to plug the email, dr.candlepun@gmail.com. We really want to hear from you guys. We want more Lost fans to be part of these conversations. You can send emails in written form, or you can attach audio or video messages to those, and we will include them in the podcast. This can be related to an upcoming episode, or season 1 in general, or the show in general. Or it can be in response to something that we've said previously. Again, we kind of like the idea of having some back and forth dialogue with you guys. But yeah, again, dr.candlepun@gmail.com. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can just comment on the video, and we'll also include those comments. But yeah, with that said, I hope you guys come back in a few weeks for episode 15, Homecoming.
Hope to see you then.
I would now like to give a special thank you to the currently active donors. These include candidate number 90, Ben Ward, candidate number 108, Jeffrey Winslow, candidate number 69, Brian Phillips, candidate number 32, Chuck Boyd, and candidate number 341, Hans. If you too would like to become a candidate, you can do so for as little as $1. One-time or recurring donations can be set up on Ko-fi.com/Candlepun or Patreon.com/Candlepun. A donation of any amount will get you credited in this podcast and added to the candidate wall, which will be displayed in all video versions of the episodes of this podcast from that point forward, even once you're no longer donating. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the multiple people that have donated equipment and resources that are used in the production of this podcast. These include Mary Mullins, Brandon Huth, Charles Huth, William McMahon, and Charlene McMahon. Until next time, namaste and good luck. Yeah, he's looking at the bird of the book. He gets frustrated. I'm going to start that over.
To like this video, click the thumbs up. Or, if there has been an incursion by the hostiles, click the thumbs down. To leave feedback, enter a comment below. To be notified when more videos arrive, click the circle and then select the notification bell. To view previous content from this channel, click either of the two boxes.